Hey guys, welcome to Get Busy Watching. I'm your host, Honest Dan. Let's talk movies.
Smile, though your heart is aching.
Stop them!
Is it just me? Or is it getting crazier out there? I used to think that my life was a tragedy. But now I realize it's a comedy.
Before we get started, I wanted to address the controversy that's buzzing around this film about mentally ill people being portrayed as psychotic killers. Guys, if this movie was just about any mentally unstable person being portrayed as a killer, maybe there's a discussion to be had, but even that is debatable. But let's please keep a few things in mind here. The mentally unstable person that is the subject of this movie is the Joker. One of the most iconic comic book villains, comic book characters in history, and has since become one of the most interesting characters to portray in films. No movie has ever portrayed him like he's an anti-hero or like he is some misunderstood person. He is a monster. Watch the movie, and it's not going out of its way to say that anyone with mental problems is going to be a killer clown. It's just this one guy. It's not like this is even the first time that a bad guy has been portrayed in cinema as the protagonist. Not necessarily the good guy, but the protagonist of the story. One could argue The Godfather, heralded as the greatest movie ever made by so many people. That's about gangsters. What, the Joker is where we draw the line? That's the line in the sand? Give me a break, folks. Nobody is going to come out of those theaters thinking that this is a representation for all people with mental illnesses.
Right.
And if they do, then they're idiots and ignore them. Anyway, I don't side with the controversy. I think it's blown way out of proportion. People looking to cause problems where problems don't need to be. So let's move on to the review itself.
This is going to be fun.
Let's talk about the man of the hour himself, Joaquin Phoenix, as Arthur Fleck / Joker.
I like him already.
I swear to God, this is probably the most haunting performance, most chilling performance that he's ever given. And considering his lineup, that's saying a lot. Man, gone are the days of him playing roles like in Signs. I think the most normal role that he's had recently was, Don't Worry, He Won't Get Far on Foot. And even that has him in like therapy classes. So it's like, wow. But he does it so well.
Gotta give the boy points.
And yeah, the movie does kind of start off portraying Arthur like he's a sympathetic character that is getting just pushed around by society. And he does start off sympathetic, but as the story progresses, he does keep spiraling downward. And honestly, it's really welcomed in a story like this for the Joker. Like, you know he's not a sympathetic character by the end. He's making these choices, and he does eventually become the monster that we all know and love as the Joker.
Just gonna come right out and say it. I hate you, Joker.
It should be noted that this movie is kind of a slow burn. It is a 2-hour flick, so it's not like a 3-hour one. It's no Apocalypse Now. But I want to say that it still keeps things interesting, despite that it takes a long time for us to see Arthur become Joker. The movie knows what to make interesting, knows what to show us that contributes to every aspect of his descent into madness. I mean, you have characters that lie to Arthur, that kick him around, don't believe him when he's telling the truth, characters that say, you know what, just bad luck, bro. And you see how that affects him. Even in his little bouts of happiness with his mom, for example, it all turns out to be some kind of lie. And it truly affects him in the best ways possible, at least in terms of the narrative. So I appreciate that it takes its time to getting to where it needs to go. It knows how to draw you in, it knows how to keep you interested, and that's a rare feat. Something that I don't see a lot of movies do these days.
It's all very exciting, really.
I love the atmosphere. I love the look of this new Gotham City. It really, it's almost next level compared to what Christopher Nolan was doing. I don't know if this movie is that good, but I will say, if you were to ask me which movie I think did it best, making Gotham City its own character, I would say this movie did it the best. Because usually, any Batman story takes place in the point of view of Batman. You know, rich echelons, all that stuff, and that's fine and all, but we don't see enough of the criminal underworld. Maybe occasionally when it's from the bad guy's point of view, but it's not the same thing. Batman Begins tried to do that, Dark Knight, and they were good. They were solid, even great. But I think this movie really, cranks it up a few notches. I don't know if it'll ever be better than this. I love the brutality in this movie. I love the violence. It's very fitting for a Joker movie. God, I must sound like a closet sociopath when I say something like that, but what can I say? I love my action movies and I love my dark films.
See, madness, as you know, is like gravity.
There are definitely some solid twists and turns. I won't go into them here. I'll save most of it for the spoiler section, but it is a well-crafted story. I gotta give it props. It's really hard to create solid twists and turns these days, but this movie does a great job with that.
Have to admit, didn't see that one coming.
You can't have a good Joker without a good laugh, right? And actually, this one works pretty well for me. At first I was going to say this was a negative because I felt like his laugh was too inconsistent. Not that the Joker's laugh isn't like that. It absolutely is. In any form of medium that he's portrayed in, his laugh does seem to change a lot. But here, I was starting to think to myself, well, it's too inconsistent. Any time that the Joker has laughed in the past, he's just fully embraced who he is. He's embraced his insanity, his worldviews about society and all that. But it's a choice. In a way, it's almost a choice, or it makes sense that it's not a choice. You know what I mean? Here, I was starting to think to myself that it was too inconsistent, because by this point, he's not the Joker yet. He hasn't embraced who he is. So I was thinking, okay, he's got two laughs in this movie. He's got the cackly Joker laugh that we all know and that we would all associate the Joker to have. But he also has kind of like a straightforward laugh. One that is certainly awkward, but it sounds like an actual laugh from an actual person. At first, I was thinking that the cackly laugh was like he's making a conscious effort doing that. You see this in the final trailer where it's almost like he's mocking someone. And actually, the more I thought about it, the more I thought that made sense. The cackly laugh, the Joker laugh, makes sense because it's a conscious effort that he's making when he's mocking someone or when he's forcing himself to laugh at a joke that maybe he doesn't find funny. Because there's a scene where he's at a comedy club and he's like taking notes, writing down what jokes people like, and when they laugh at a dirty joke, he kind of does this thing where he looks around and goes, oh, people think that's funny, so I'm going to laugh at that too. Clearly not having an actual grasp of what makes the joke funny, but it's a forced laugh. He's making himself laugh like that. But when it's the mental illness, because he has this card that says that he's got a brain injury and he laughs uncontrollably, that doesn't match what he's actually feeling or the situation. It's completely inappropriate, but there's an explanation behind that. But it's not the cackly laugh. It's a natural one. So the more I thought about it, I was like, oh, right. So this does actually fit within the character. So no longer a problem, no longer a negative. I now get what the movie was going for. And I kind of like it. I like both angles that it takes. And actually, the greatest twist that this movie offers is that it's low-key a sequel. You want to know how I know that? Because of Arthur's mom. She has such an intense backstory that they made an entire movie about it. She may not have been the focus, but she was a central, pivotal character even. Did you know that in the past, she was a professor for many years? But criminally, she was denied tenure for the most despicable of reasons. And what were those reasons one more time?
Male academia.
Aha. And now that male academia drove her to insanity, and now we have the Joker. And once I made that connection, I was so happy. But it's time to talk about the negatives, and I do have a couple. I'm not opposed to the idea of turning Thomas Wayne into a straight asshole. I'm really not. It's definitely, otherworldly, like another dimension type thing. It's not like we know that much about Thomas Wayne. I'm sure there's plenty of comics that go deeper into who Thomas Wayne was. Or, the Flashpoint paradox, which shows him as Batman, but beyond that, we don't really know that much. He's always touted as this great man who was taken away from this world at a time when Gotham City needed him most, that sort of thing, and then arise Batman. Here, he is a straight asshole, and I'm usually open to different interpretations, especially if they kind of work, and this one would have if they had done it a little bit differently. In private, it kind of makes sense. Like if it's there is a scene where Arthur and Thomas are talking to each other, and yeah, here Thomas is an asshole. He's portrayed as an asshole. Those are his true colors. But he's also kind of that way when he's on television. You'd think that in the rich person's world, when you're being looked at as this next great savior of sorts, that you would be a little more subtle about who you are. It's all about PR and public image. So if you go around saying that these people are clowns, how dare they not realize we're trying to help them, you can kind of see it almost blatantly that you're being an asshole. But you don't want that, especially if you're in the upper class. You need to be better than that. You need to put on a different kind of mask. And unfortunately, he's kind of a dick no matter what angle they put him in. Whether he's on television or real life, but it needs to be just in real life, not in television. So I didn't really like how they handled that. And it was otherwise a great idea.
A person could really learn to hate that guy.
Alright, going into spoilers now. If you want to avoid those, jump to this time code. It's more of a half and half, both a positive and a negative, and it all revolves around Zazie Beetz' character, Sophie. She plays a neighbor of Arthur's and is his love interest throughout most of the flick. Now, at first I was a little negative toward it because I didn't think that their romance was justified, but then as the story progressed, I started thinking to myself, oh, Is she gonna be like the next gen Harley Quinn? Like, is she playing basically another Harley Quinn? I was actually a little interested. It's not like the first time that a Batman movie would take a character and give them an identity that isn't from the comics or any previous source.
You should use your full name. I like that name. Robin.
In a way, it almost would have made sense, considering how their relationship was being touted. Now, I'm not going to give anything away here, but basically that's not the direction they go in. I'll just say that what they do with Sophie feels pointless. Now, don't get me wrong. what was done was in its own right. I did not see that shit coming. I really didn't. Brilliantly crafted. I didn't. It's hard to make a good twist these days. Sometimes you see them coming, or they don't really take you by surprise. Like, okay, that makes sense. This one, a complete surprise. But in the context of the overall narrative, I'm not sure what the point was. Because once you see what they actually do with Sophie's character, it almost doesn't make any sense. It almost seems pointless. Because once you realize what it is, what's going on, it doesn't really factor into Arthur's character that much. It's kind of just a twist for the sake of there being a twist.
That's not funny.
And I don't know. There was a good idea here, and I think they should have gone the route of making Sophie the next Harley Quinn type character. But what they ended up doing, while a great twist, not a sensible one when you really think about how it's inserted in the narrative. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of enjoy the scene where the Waynes get killed in the alleyway. Okay, Bruce doesn't die, obviously. It's still a Batman story, kind of, but it kind of, because Thomas Wayne has been portrayed as a dick slice in this movie, the fact that he dies in that alleyway almost kind of feels justified. If not justified, then almost rewarding.
The dead parents are just icing on the cake.
Oh God, that's a horrible thing to say, but it kind of is. You can look at a story like this and think, wow, maybe Thomas Wayne wasn't such a great guy. Considering how in most iterations of Batman that we see, we either know very little about Thomas Wayne or nothing. And anytime we get like some in-depth look at him, like the Flashpoint Paradox, where he's Batman, but he's like this dark, gritty Batman who uses guns and has no qualms about murder. It's like, man, maybe this makes more sense than we might think. Before I give my overall impressions of the movie and my final rating, I want to go into, this was kind of a jarring experience, I won't lie. The reason why I say that is because I'm a Marvel fanboy. What can I say? I love Wonder Woman. I love Aquaman, and certainly Shazam, I think, is a solid third place in terms of the DCEU. So I like my fun, peppy, colorful action movies, and I can appreciate a dark movie from time to time too. But what separates this movie from the rest is that it truly is kind of that villain's story that ends with the villain winning. There's not another Joker movie, guys. I mean, as far as I know, there's no Joker 2 that's announced. This is a one and done sucker. Think about that. In the MCU, the heroes always win. I mean, that's the genre. You want the superheroes to win. Plus, it's owned by Disney. The good guys always have to prevail.
Party pooper. No cake for you.
But even if the villain wins, like, say, Civil War, you can argue that Zemo wins. His goal was to break up the Avengers, and he succeeds. But the movie still ends on this, like, hopeful note. And you can argue to a greater degree, Avengers Infinity War. Thanos won. But let's face it, we also knew there was a part 2. We knew that Endgame was going to happen. And because one of the greatest sins that I will never forgive the marketing department for is releasing the idea that Spider-Man Far From Home was coming out. There's going to be another Spider-Man movie, so we know Spider-Man comes back in some way. It erases all tension. And that's kind of a shame, because even though in Infinity War Thanos wins, we know that there's going to be a part 2. And we know that all of this is going to be erased in some way. But the Joker is very unique in this aspect. And there's no announced sequel. This isn't going to be tied into the DC extended universe in any way. And as far as I know, there's no plans for a sequel. This is actually the kind of movie you don't want a sequel for. Because then you have to, like, do something with it. And I don't think there should be anything done with it. This should be a one and done flick and completely separate from anything that we know. Honestly, I'm totally okay with that. What do you know? DC really does push the envelope in how superhero stories are presented. From Christopher Nolan creating arguably the greatest superhero movie ever to Wonder Woman making the greatest DC movie within the DCEU, DC movies really know how to push the envelope, really know how to do something different. Now, don't get me wrong. I think in terms of consistent quality, the Marvel films are better. But man, DC knows how to break through some limitations. They're not afraid to take that extra step. And that's got to be admired. Overall, I don't think it's a perfect film. I don't agree with IMDb's 9.2 rating. I'm sure that's going to drop in the coming months or even weeks, but I don't agree with Rotten Tomatoes' score either. 62%, I think it's much better than that. You gotta hand it to a movie that does something a little different. I'm just gonna say, I'm somewhere in between. I think this is a really good movie, and I think it's definitely worth seeing. I think it's an imperfect film, as most films are, but if you're looking for something different, if you want to just see a superhero movie where the bad guy wins for once, and that's the end of the story, then yeah, this is honestly a great flick for you to check out. And even setting that aside and you just want to see a Joker origin story, worse ones have been told. I think even The Killing Joke had its fair share of negativity, and well earned thanks to that first half, but that's a whole nother thing. But honestly, I'm gonna say if you don't mind a different kind of Joker movie, this is a good one. This is more than a good one. It's a damn good one. My honest rating for Joker is a strong 4 out of 5. Thanks so much for watching, you guys. I really appreciate it. Have a great day. Hope to see you soon.
Keep on trying, smile. What's the use of crying? You find that life is still worthwhile if you just smile. You'll find that life's worthwhile if you just smile.